Hi, welcome to this belated live webinar. We try to run the live webinars at 11 o'clock UK time. That's at 12 o'clock Central European time, 1 o'clock Eastern European time, Cyprus time. Running a bit late today. Had a great client in and just needed to talk to him a bit longer, which just disrupted our preparations for this live event. But you can always watch back by subscribing to our YouTube channel and share it with people that might find the information that we're providing interesting and informative. You can ask questions during the live chat. We've also got a Twitter space running at the moment, so you can find out a bit more there. Our retained clients have specific exclusive content. So if I talk a bit generally here, you could consider being a retained client to get that extra level of advice and information. So what we're looking at today is to contrast the benefits and the limitations of permanent residency for expats living and working abroad post-Brexit. So post-Brexit doesn't make any change for people that are expats that are outside the EU constraints, but UK expats within the EU or EU expats within the UK have some additional issues to look at, depending on what you define as permanent residency. So permanent residency is in effect, it's a permission to stay and live in that country indefinitely for living and working abroad. To get there, certain conditions have to be met. And generally, we're talking about time served, that you're living in that country for a period of time. There are some other ways to go about it, and we'll talk about that later, and that's a bit more specialised, but there are routes that are available. In the UK, permanent residency is not that simple because they call it indefinite leave to remain. That means that you've been in the UK at least 5 years. Post-Brexit, with Brexit, EU expats living in the UK were then required to sign up either for a pre-settled status or settled status. So the pre-settled status is a residency permit, and the settled status is a permanent residency under the British rules. But whatever you've got those statuses, it comes with EU withdrawal rights protections. In the EU, it's actually simpler. Can you believe it? That a residency permit is a temporary resident permit to live and work in the EU, and that can become a permanent residency after 5 years. And generally around the world, there are permanent residencies, and they have different names in different countries, but it's the same thing. So we're talking about that generic permanent residency after 5 years, or sooner, depending on special circumstances, whether it's called a green card, indefinite leave to remain, settled status, or just permanent residency. So let's go through some different notions on that. A permanent residency cannot give you the right to vote. It's not citizen. You need to be a citizen of a country to have a right to vote. So being a permanent resident doesn't give you the right to vote. So that's an important distinction. If that's important to you, you need to get citizenship. But the settled status is permanent residency does not give you the right to vote. When you get UK retained, when you can stay in the UK and you get indefinite leave to remain, you can, or permanent residency, you can remain living and working abroad in that country indefinitely, but that comes with conditions. So you've got indefinite leave to remain or permanent residency or settled status, but there's certain different conditions depending upon what that is. The Canadians will look at you on a rolling 5-year basis. The USA will potentially remove the permanent residency status if you spent any extended period outside the outside USA. But the UK, with indefinite leave to remain, you could lose that if you spend 2 years outside the UK, which is distinctly different for the UK. Because just consider, if an EU expat in the UK has got settled status, that's only lost if they spend 5 consecutive years outside the UK. And another point that permanent residents can't do is they can't travel visa-free to any other EU country if a travel authority is required. So visa-free travel in 2023 around the EU requires electronic travel authority unless you're an EU citizen, and or you've got a resident or permanent residency permit. So, but a permanent residency only works for the country where you've got the permanent residency. So you still need the travel authority for other countries. So you can't travel freely around the EU on your permanent residency permit. So don't forget to subscribe and listen to our YouTube channel, Living and Working Abroad, and share it with friends, with comments. We will come back to you, maybe not today, but we will get back and answer you on our YouTube channel. Once we get to 100,000 subscribers per episode, we will answer you within 30 seconds, that's for sure. What can permanent residents do? What they can do is it can be obtained after 5 years with a resident permit. So generally, you need a resident permit, and you need to be resident in the country for up to 5 years to acquire that. Cyprus, though, as an EU country, will allow you to jump straight to a permanent residency if you can prove that you've been in the country for the last 5 years. Now, this could be very good for UK expats who've got a holiday home in Cyprus but haven't got a residency permit, because if you can prove they've been here for the last 5 years, 2023 goes back to 2018, we talk about pre-Brexit. So for a couple of years, UK expats can still get permanent residency with withdrawal rights, EU withdrawal citizens' rights. If you want more information on that, contact us at ProACTPartnership.com. If you've got UK pre-settled status as an EU expat in the UK, you have pre-settled status. Now, that only lasts for 5 years. So after 5 years, you have to convert that into settled status. Otherwise, that right is lost and you don't progress. And to progress from pre-settled status to permanent residency, you need to prove that you've been in the UK for 6 of 12 months for the last 5 years. So that's quite important. So if you're an EU expat in the UK with pre-settled status, you need to be spending at least 6 months a year in the UK. And that means doing a tax return in the UK. And for more help and guidance, doing UK tax returns as an expat, whether you're in the UK or outside, contact us at ProACTPartnership.com. Generally, a permanent residency is a step towards citizenship. So if a country is going to allow citizenship, the permanent residency is a step towards that. So without permanent residency, you haven't got some of the proof that you would need for citizenship. Now, I'm not saying that you can't absolutely in every country progress to citizenship. There might be special circumstances through history or family or marriage, but generally, permanent residency is a great step towards citizenship of that country. So if you're interested in citizenship, contact us for help and guidance and getting permanent residency, because that can stay where it is, and you can live and work in that country indefinitely for the rest of your life. But also, you can move on to citizenship. So, for example, EU expats can move on to citizenship 12 months after having permanent residency. But you need to be a permanent residency first before you can be the citizen. If you've got indefinite leave to remain in the UK, that is lost after 2 years. If you're absent from the UK for 2 years, a permanent residency, the indefinite leave to remain, is lost. Now, with other countries, that's not necessarily the case, but it is something to bear in mind. If you don't keep using your permanent residency in some countries like the UK, then it can be lost. What a permanent residency can do is work in that country. they can own land and property in that country, they can operate a business in that country. So you've got quite a lot of opportunities and freedoms to be living and working in that country. If we look at the Brexit situation, we look at the EU situation, a permanent resident doesn't need an electronic travel authority to travel between his country of permanent residency and his home country. So a UK expat is outside the EU, it's visa-free travel into the EU. Therefore, they will need electronic travel authority to travel to that EU country from 2023. If you've got a holiday home in Cyprus or Spain with permanent residency or a resident permit, you don't need the electronic travel authority with that resident permit. You can travel just with your passport and your resident permit. But the permanent resident is still limited to short stay, 90-day stays in 180 in other EU countries. So the permanent residency in one EU country does not give you the right to freely travel or freely stay in another country. The travel authorities are coming in for visa-free travel into the EU, and they will apply the short stay constraint for the EU Schengen zone of 90 days in 180 for all countries. And as we said before, as far as the EU goes, most countries in the EU are in the Schengen zone. Those that are not, Bulgaria, Romania and Cyprus have applied to join, apart from Ireland, which is the only country that isn't a member. But there are some other countries, EEA countries, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, that are also in the Schengen zone. So look out for that. You can have residency in more than one country. So if you're a permanent resident in one country, you might not be able to get a permanent residency in another country, but you could definitely get a residency permit in another country. So if you've got a holiday home in Portugal and Spain and France, you get a residency permit for each country, and then you've got free travel and freedom of movement between your home country and that country for that. Some countries in the EU don't allow dual citizenship. That includes Austria, Germany and Spain. So Austrian, German, Spain expats can't get a citizenship in another country, but they can still get a permanent residency in another country to give them that flexibility. A British expat can't have a dual residency with Germany or Spain or Austria, but they could have a permanent residency, which gives them the same freedoms apart from voting. But if you want a German citizenship, you give up your British passport and your British citizenship, which is, you may judge that to be a big step or not. So, and just to reiterate, the permanent residency doesn't give you the electronic travel authority freedom. You don't need that to travel into that and out of that country. So let's have a look at some of the other things that you can or cannot do as a permanent resident. As a permanent resident, it could be a tax resident, but it doesn't have to be a tax resident. So if you're not spending more than 6 months in a country, you don't have to be tax resident. You can just have extended residency stays without the short stay constraints of the Schengen zone. You can lose your permanent residency if you get a criminal conviction or you found that you provided false information. Permanent residency can be bought at very short notice. So in Spain or Cyprus, within 3 months, you can get, by investment into property or business, within 3 months of permanent residency status. In Malta, you could get one after 6 months. What you have to prove for permanent residency are things like you have to have a home in the country, either tenancy or an owned property, or you need an income, and you need an income to support yourself, probably or possibly healthcare as well, and a clean criminal record. There may be other constraints outside the EU for medicals and the like. Really varies country by country. For more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Our expat experts can help you and guide us on the residency, visa, and residency permit and permanent residency rules for any country, as well as looking after your tax affairs. And contact us at proactpartnership.com. As we said before, our retained clients get exclusive content. So subscribe to the channel, but consider subscribing for the advice and the content and the exclusive content from ProACT Partnership. Contact us at proactpartnership.com or sign up at proact.co.uk. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.